Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at Hawk Blogger. And I got to tell you, folks, I was so buzzing from from the first day of camp yesterday and all the content, all the news. I barely slept. It was like the night before NFC Championship game. My mind was racing. I was thinking about practice today. I was thinking about what's coming next. There is so much. I mean, it's a little bit like crawling through the desert, just looking for a drip of water for the last 6 weeks. I mean, I enjoyed kind of going through talking about all the different areas of the team that we did some research on and investigated. But then all of a sudden, you just fall into this deep river of fresh water flowing nonstop. There was so much news yesterday. There was so much information to take in. It was it was a great day. It was a great day to be a Seahawks fan. Certainly a day that I enjoyed and will remember. I can't say I remember Pete Carroll's first day. I don't know if I was there for that. I think I would have been. But yeah, it's very memorable. I definitely remember 2011. I don't know if I remember as much about 2010. But on today's show, I'm going to, one, recap some stuff for people that may have missed all the news that's been going on and share some thoughts about that. But I'm also going to share some additional insights that I had watching this team yesterday, things that kind of jumped out at me, things that I'll be paying attention to going forward. So we'll talk about that. Feel free to drop some questions in chat if you have them. Especially if you're a club or suite level member, I'll focus there first. It's one of the benefits of being a YouTube member is I can prioritize your questions. I want to welcome William Awesome Co and Corey Coleman, who are here in chat already. It's great to see you guys. Good morning to you. And let's start with a little bit of news. And for folks that are like, hey, where's the Seahawks 7 that you've been doing the last couple mornings? Well, I kind of feel like the Seahawks 7 might be a better afternoon or evening content or series because so much happens throughout the day. It might be nice to have kind of a catch-all at the end of the day. So I'll play with it. I'm planning on trying to post it later today that will summarize all that happened through the day. And you guys can let me know. Maybe, I mean, I'm sure that the answer will be, hey, we want one in the morning. We want one in the afternoon. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm producing quite a bit lately, but we'll see. So let's get to the news of the day, and let's start with some of the things that are fresh news that you may not have heard of. And this is in the division. So there unfortunately looks like there is some injury news with the Los Angeles Rams. Their cornerback, trying to make sure I get the right name here. Darian Kendrick is believed to have torn his ACL during practice yesterday. And if so, would be lost for the year. So hopefully that's not the case, but that is currently what is being reported. So doing a quick look at Darian Kendrick's time last year at corner. 59.7 graded corner last year, played at 871 snaps for the Rams, played mostly right cornerback, but played both sides. He did have a 60.4 coverage grade. So although Darian Kendrick was not necessarily, one of the strongest corners, big loss for the Rams. Hopefully it turns out that they find something different, but that is some news there. If you haven't been following it, also news in the division. Brandon Ayuk reported to 49ers training camp and is holding in. He is not practicing. Rumors that he was, or reports out there that he was seen talking to John Lynch, the GM for the 49ers. Nothing other than that so far. Additionally, had some conversations saw some news come out, obviously, about Trent Williams, the best player on the 49ers, their left tackle, all-world left tackle. He is holding out, was not at practice yesterday, will be fined irrevocably for missing practice. If you don't know, the rule change from a few years ago, players holding out, it used to be that they'd get fined, but then they'd kind of forgive the fines once the player signed their deal. You no longer can forgive those fines. And I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure you can't like factor them into the deal either, but not sure. So that has changed the kind of tenor of how people handle contract disputes as players. Other news that relates to teams on the Seahawks schedule. There was a recent report. So let me pull it up here. Recent report that Kirk Cousins, who is recovering from his torn Achilles, has been medically cleared, but the Falcons will be diligent with him and other players coming off injury in their modified reps. So he will not start camp on PUP. That is good news for the Falcons, and will, put him obviously on track to start the season with Atlanta. Those are a couple of the pieces of news there. From a Seahawks perspective, other bits of news. Julian Love signs a 3-year, $36 million contract with Seattle, an extension. This is a big bit of news, not something that had been expected or discussed, but happened after practice yesterday. And really, the implication there is that Mike McDonald, Leslie Frazier, Adam Dirty, they've already seen what they need to see to say they want this guy to be central to what they're building here. I mean, for you to sign a player to an extension of meaningful size and meaningful years without having played a snap for you with even pads on, that is not what I would have expected, but it happened. And so, I happen to think Julian Love is a good player, and I am happy about the deal. I know that a lot of the film guys out there, Griff for one, I think Maddie as well, not fans of Julian Love in general, don't think he is worth what the Seahawks are paying him. And I know that they're pretty upset. They're like, hey, you could have spent 3 years, $26 million on Jordan Brooks. And they were big fans of Jordan Brooks. I respect those guys and the work they put in on film study, and they have a different appreciation for different aspects of what players bring to the table. For me, Jordan Brooks didn't make a lot of plays in terms of actually impactful plays that changed the course of a game. And while I think his deal was a very reasonable one, I wasn't upset to see him go. I think he'll do very well for Miami. I wish him all the best. Julian Love, I thought played quite well for the bulk of last season. He started his first 2 games were really rough, but from game 3 on, he played quite well. And I thought his play in the Philadelphia game, not just the final interception, but just in general was really good. And, he ended up getting voted into the Pro Bowl, not by fans, but by players and coaches. And I think that also speaks highly of Julian Love. So, and if I'm not mistaken, Julian Love was voted to the top 100 players by players and coaches. I think it's actually just by players. The NFL top 100 list, he was voted 95. So I guess, like, when you listen to Leslie Frazier talk about Julian Love, I think that I trust I trust what I heard there. I trust the other players in the league. I trust the front office in working with the coaching staff to make this decision. Um, and so I'm not wringing my hands about this the way I think some may be, and some might be like just not on board with how the Seahawks um, approach this. But big news nonetheless, and certainly something that I think is pretty substantial for where the Seahawks are in terms of building this roster. I wanted to play. Let's see if I can find this. I thought I had this note from sound from Leslie Frazier on Julian Love. But I don't think I can get to it quickly enough. So I'll just keep moving. All right. Other news yesterday, if you missed it, Connor Williams. This is the thing that I think everybody is kind of keeping an eye on. Reported to have passed his physical, reported to have had a quote great visit, according to Mike McDonald. And then Drew Rosenhaus, who's the agent for Julian Love, even if the deal for Julian Love, the extension, had nothing to do with Connor Williams. Like Brady Henderson, who's the best in the biz from my perspective, said, hey, those extensions are usually long in the works. They don't just happen, to sign a different player. That makes sense. It's also possible that they had it ready to go if they had reason to trigger it, and now they have reason to trigger it. So I think that's possible. But if nothing else, if the only connection is Drew Rosenhaus, you just did a deal and you just made Drew Rosenhaus some money. I think that has some potential impact to doing a deal with him on another client who has already been reported to be there, already reported to pass a physical, already reported. I mean, if he really passed his physical, guys, I can't stress enough how big of a deal that is. Now maybe it was a good enough to sign physical as opposed to good enough to practice physical. But in any event, I think that that's pretty substantial. And I think the fact that they've already just done some business with Drew Rosenhaus gives me some hope that this could finalize quickly with Connor Williams. Haven't heard of any other place that he is going to visit. The rumors have been that the 49ers are interested in him, but the 49ers have quite a bit of their own problems to solve right now. So I don't know that throwing out more money to Connor Williams when you haven't paid Brandon Ayuk and you haven't paid Trent Williams, I don't know how well that would go over in the locker room. All right. So we got a question here. Taylor E asks, a YouTube member, thank you for being a YouTube member. Do we know if Connor Williams is still in town? Do not know if Connor Williams is still in town. Have not heard any reports of him going anywhere else. And the fact that they said that the report was from Adam Schefter that they started contract negotiations. Generally, if you have a guy visit, the way it works is if they visit and nothing's interesting, then you very quickly get reports of where they're going on their next visit. That's how the agents work it. That's how they drum up, interest in general. We have not heard the reports of anywhere else that he's going. We have heard that he is in negotiations and passed his physical. So if all those things are true, and we haven't heard reports of where he'd go next, I think the implication is that they're going to get a deal done and he's going to be here and be practicing soon. that's kind of my read on it. And I don't get out over my skis too much on these things because I don't want to be disappointed. But that's my honest read. I think that's what's likely happening. Now, it doesn't mean that they will come to an agreement. John might feel like they're at, Rosenhaus always asks for a lot. He might back off on that. And then Rosenhaus will use leverage and have Connor Williams leave the city. It's like when you go to buy a car at a dealer, the only way you're ever going to get the best price in most cases is by leaving. So Rosenhaus might feel the need to take him to another team just to really press on the Seahawks to get the best possible deal. But hopefully not. Hopefully not. So I think those were probably the big pieces of news. Other little bits that came out in training camp yesterday. Abe Lucas not practicing, has not passed his physical, and Mike McDonald was pretty hesitant about saying anything about when he might come back. And at first, my thought was, oh, he's just going to be one of those guys that one of those coaches that just doesn't give you that kind of information. But then a few minutes later, when asked about Cameron Young, he said, yeah, I mean, I think he could be back next week. So he gave a time. He was hesitant, like, don't hold me to that, but he did give a time frame there. So the fact that he did not give a time frame, distraction. The fact that he did not give a time frame on Abe Lucas, it's not great news. Gonna be honest, not great news, and could imply that this is a little bit longer to go. But I don't know. I mean, my eyes on Abe Lucas, both on his Instagram and in person, Mike said he was running full speed. I'd like to think that this is gonna clear up sooner than some people are saying, who have, gotten pretty pretty negative, I guess, pretty concerned about what this is gonna look like. I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful there, and I think we'll just have to watch and wait on that one. But like I've said before, George Fant is a completely different entity at right tackle than anyone that the Seahawks ran out there last year. If they have to play the full season with George Fant, that would be a marked improvement over what they got out of the right tackle spot last season. He is a starting level right tackle in the NFL. The other part of that is McClendon Curtis got moved from right guard to right tackle, backup right tackle. And the interesting thing, a lot of the reporters are interpreting that to mean that the reason he moved there is because they're expecting Abe Lucas to be out for a while. I can see that that's a possible explanation. The reason that the thought there is, if McClendon Curtis is one of your most promising linemen and he was playing starting right guard before, why put him behind George Fant where he's not going to start over George Fant? And I guess the way I read it is Anthony Bradford was not there for OTAs and mini camps. So to me, this was more about Anthony Bradford coming back and the fact that Christian Haynes is there at right guard, and they've got a pretty strong rotation there that doesn't need a third player necessarily. It's also going to be hard to get. I mean, 3 players cannot get appropriate snaps to have a true competition at one position on the offensive line. I think that they've decided that they want a right guard to be a competition between Bradford and Haynes. And so Curtis playing right tackle, I think, gives them additional flexibility. I think the fact that they know that he can play guard is good. I will be curious to see what happens at left guard. As of now, they've got younger depth there. You're talking about guys like Satawa Lamea, um, Raekwon O'Neal being guys that can play left guard. But maybe, depending on how things play out, maybe they look. I think for now they're kind of keeping guys left and right. They're not really switching. So, Raekwon seems to be more of a left side guy, and Curtis seems to be more of a right side guy. Lamea seems more of a left side guy. Haynes more of a right side guy. So we might not see as much movement there, but I'm not reading as much into the implications of Curtis at right tackle as it means to Abe Lucas, as I think some other folks are. So let's kind of get into some of the insights that I had for practice yesterday, some of which I haven't really shared as much yet. I think reflecting on it, one of the things that really stood out for me in yesterday's practice was how polished I thought the first string offense looked in day one. There was a tweet from I think it's Nick Wagoner that I shared yesterday, and it was, quote, "As you might suspect, on the first day and without pads, there was some sloppiness all around. Multiple flags for pre-snap infractions, including on the first play of team drills." Guys, that's what almost always is the case early in camp, especially on offense. And with a new coordinator and a new offense, new scheme, a lot of new players, that just wasn't the case yesterday. I honestly think there was only one false start that I remember. It was with PJ Walker playing quarterback and, Garrett Greenfield at left tackle and, whatever. So it was like the guys were in the huddle, and it seemed like when they broke the huddle, a couple of the guys came back to the huddle because they weren't quite sure what they heard. And so there's just a miscommunication, which is totally normal for that time of the year relative to the practice schedule, the training camp schedule. So that really stood out. But the other thing that stood out, and I unfortunately I can't get into too much detail, but this offense looked so much more modern than what I have been accustomed to seeing in Seattle the last few years. And I guess the best way that I can talk about it is, if you watch the Huskies, let's just talk about the Huskies under Ryan Grubb. What did you see from them? You saw lots of motion, fast motion, like true jet motion where guys are racing across the field, putting some horizontal stress on the defense. You saw a lot of misdirection where maybe it felt like the offense was moving one way, but the running play or the passing play was going the other direction. You saw one of the things that I loved about Ryan Grubb's offense, and I think this just speaks to my soul of what, kind of how I live my life, but also what I love to see in my teams, is it is aggressive in pushing the ball downfield, but also low risk. What do I mean by that? Well, how many times did you see Michael Penix make a really rapid check down to a receiver or a running back in the flat when there was quick pressure, when he didn't like the reads of the coverage downfield, and he got rid of the ball before anybody could get to him? That's not, everyone just assumes that's a Michael Penix thing. But Ryan Grubb created a scheme and an offense that always had an outlet, a pressure release valve for Michael Penix. And he always knew where it was. And credit to Penix for taking advantage of that. And I think the real notion here that I really hope comes with Geno as well is you never grow broke when you take a profit. And there are too many times last year where Geno kind of fell back into, I think, old habits of being too risky, pushing the ball downfield and not taking some easy checks in rhythm. But in his first year as a starter, especially in the first half of the season, that was something that stood out massively in contrast to Russell Wilson, who is notorious for being stubborn about wanting to push the ball downfield, wanting the big play, and not wanting to check the ball down. He just really rarely did it. And when he did, he was so late. The defense had already rotated and there wasn't yards to be gained. One of the things that is a big misnomer about quarterback development, so many people talk about physical stuff and they talk about passes that they can make or how fast they run or all these other things. If you really think about it, the quarterbacks that have become great, they haven't necessarily developed physically over their careers. They've developed upstairs. They've developed in their processing. They've developed in their pre-snap reads. They've developed in their willingness and ability to take what the defense gives them and always find the weakness and always find a way to get positive yards. The best versions of Aaron Rodgers, the best versions of Tom Brady. These are guys that, Peyton Manning, these are guys that just always. And now I'd say Patrick Mahomes. This was last year, a big part of what Patrick Mahomes changed. How many passes he threw from behind the line of scrimmage, easy passes, not always pushing the ball downfield. And so I see evidence that Ryan Grubb understands that quarterbacks need pressure release. They need a place to get rid of the ball if things break down. And I think there's evidence that we're going to see that here. And I think that's a really, really big deal to any offense that you want to be sustainable in the league. Other things we saw from Ryan Grubb's offense at University of Washington that you can kind of have reason to believe will be here based on what I'm seeing. I mean, attacking all sides of the field, all parts of the field. Having a lot of kind of crisscross routes and some really interesting blocking schemes, putting players, receivers that is, in positions you wouldn't normally expect them to be in, and then putting them in motion to create mismatches or get the matchup that they want for that player. I think there was all the things that helped me kind of fall in love pretty quickly with Ryan Grubb's offense in University of Washington. I saw evidence of that coming with him. And I got to say, like, Geno looked really good. It's a little bit harder to know for sure because I thought Sam Howell looked really bad, or at least pretty bad. So how much was Geno just looking sharp relative? How much was it the fact that he's playing with, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and JSN and Sam Howell's not necessarily playing with all those guys. But there's nothing bad about Geno looking good regardless. The other pieces that I think I would say about the offense that um, stood out to me is the pace. I talked about this a little bit, but quick to the line, quick in their motion, quick to snap, quick to release. This it felt like a basketball game. Like it was moving. And there's times where you see guys just like really plodding, and that was not the case. Interesting note, if you missed this, Ryan Grubb was using headphones to call and play. So they were actually using like game day communication to get the plays in. So there it was as close to kind of a game situation as is possible in a practice. And that was kind of cool to see. Other things that I'd kind of mention that I didn't talk about in my write up on hawkblogger.com. Hopefully, you've had a chance to read that by now. But I thought Ricky Person, running back that they signed, in the last few weeks, I thought he looked decent. He has my attention as someone who'll be in competition. I've mentioned before, I thought George Holani looked good, not only as a runner, but as a receiver. I think he's built to be an NFL back. I think his physique is something that I think can hold up in the NFL. I am going to be wondering about Kenny McIntosh. He did not jump out to me the way I would have maybe expected. And it's early. We'll see. But I'm not so sure that his spot is safe. So that would be another one that I'd share there. I thought Noah Fant looked good yesterday. Looked fast, looked sure-handed. I think he's going to get a chance to catch and run with the football in ways that he wasn't as much last year. And that's an underrated part of his game. Think about the play against the Giants when Drew Lock hit him and he ran like 50 yards down the sideline. Think about the plays in the last drive against the Lions where he caught and ran, got a couple first downs, really started that drive to win that game. I think Noah Fant was an underutilized part of the offense last year. And I think that the way he was utilized was also not ideal. I think getting him in position to run after the catch, getting the ball quickly, and having some room in front of him could be an interesting thing to watch out for. Other pieces. You know, I did like this is not specific to offense, but just other things that were insights for me watching yesterday. I'm still looking for the blue chip. I think that did not necessarily jump out yesterday. That there was like, okay, I thought DK Metcalf had such a good practice that he was the closest thing I would say to being like, okay, this looks like a really good version of a terrific athlete. I thought I thought that um I thought that Geno Smith looked pretty close to that level, but we'll see about that. I don't know that there was other guys that I'm like, wow. Now, of course, this is a padless practice. Of course, it's day one, but that's an important thing. Like, there were times where, I mean, if you watched Walter Jones practice, if you watch Steve Hutchinson practice, even without pads, they were just kind of different beings, and you could kind of tell what you were looking at. Same with, Brandon Browner and Richard Sherman and, Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor. Those guys were unique specimens. And I don't think it's as obvious with this group yet. And so it's something that's kind of it's an important thing to monitor because this team won't be great unless they have elite players. Having a lot of good players is not enough. It just isn't. Um, Having some true blue chip guys is key. And so I didn't see that necessarily yet. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but not yet. Um, but I would say that there were a few guys that caught my attention as new people out there that maybe I hadn't seen before or maybe looked a little different. First guy I'd call out there, I've said before, but Lance Boykin, he's number 18. So if you're going and watching, keep an eye on him. I thought he looked really good at corner and made a nice pass breakup. He's a tall dude. He is lean, but he's not thin. Like he's thicker than some of the other corners. And I'm intrigued. Like he maybe has a chance to push Mike Jackson. Like he was good enough that I'm like, okay, this guy's not only higher up in the cornerback competition than I expected to make the roster, he might be good enough to push guys ahead of him. Now, one day, one practice, I'm going to keep caveating, but he jumped out. He jumped out for sure. Another guy that I liked what I saw in first practice I've seen is Nelson Caesar, undrafted free agent, edge player from Houston. He had a nice rush. Trying to remember who he beat. Let me look at my notes. He beat. I think he beat either. I think he might have beaten Curtis, but I'm not sure. But he was around the right side of the line. It would have been a sack. That was nice. So that's a guy I kind of have my eyes on. Nothing really of note from Draymond Jones. Nuosu had a nice practice. Nothing crazy. I think he beat I can't remember who around the left side of the line in one play for what would have been a sack. Derek Hall had a nice practice. So Boy Mafe actually beat George Fant for what would have been a sack. So, there were some guys that I thought played reasonably well. I like what we're seeing from Kayvon Wallace so far, just as kind of a personality out there. I think a tight end that we haven't talked about much, but that is worth keeping an eye on in terms of making the roster is Brady Russell. We'll see where he is relative to Tyler Mabry, but he's pretty fast. I didn't like watching him go in motion. Like he stands out relative to the other guys in that situation. But overall, yeah, I mean, I think one other thing that I think if you harken back to Ryan Grubb's Husky days that I think there's reason to think will be here for Seattle is that outside zone and focus on the run game more than people realize. I think that's going to be a big part of what they try to do. I think we'll see what happens once they get into pads, but I think that's something to keep an eye on. Kenneth Walker in those kinds of plays for me feels like a pretty big weapon. Zach Charbonnet, I didn't see a lot from him, but I did see him, and man, he is a truck waiting to happen, man. He is just a big dude, big legs, massive calves. So yeah, Lots to like there. I will say that my first eyes on Oluwatimi were, I don't know that he's that much bigger, maybe a little thicker in the lower half. I did not necessarily see more power there that I'm hoping to see, but I really am going to withhold judgment until we get pads and until we see him really pushing up against some things on a more regular basis. We got a super chat from Bruce. Says, when's the next practice with media and when do the pads come on? Thank you for the super chat, Bruce. So team practices today. That practice is not open to the public. It's open to media. When do the pads come on? They don't tell us that. So we do not know. They will probably not have pads on for a few more days. It might be next week before we see pads with the team. So that's where we are there. Thank you again for the super chat, Bruce. And if you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. Really appreciate it. And you can be a YouTube member. Join the links in the description of the video, as well as joining over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. I think Jeremy Yanasek just joined. Welcome, Jeremy. Great to have you. We've got, my goodness, we've got a lot of folks joining, which is really cool. Let's see. Darren just joined. Welcome, Darren. Greg Beeson joined. A bunch of other folks have joined. So patreon.com/hawkblogger. It is a great time to join. And one of the things I will mention is that some of the things that are not necessarily public knowledge, I will be sharing with suite level YouTube members and potentially some of the Ring of Honor Patreon members. And don't forget that if you choose to be a Patreon member, we are going to have our Ring of Honor dinner at Daniel's Broiler the Friday before the first day of the first game of the season. So you can still have time to join as a Ring of Honor member at patreon.com/hawkblogger and join us for a great steak dinner on me. So it would be great to have you join. You already make some of your money back just by that dinner. Trust me, it is not cheap. So would appreciate anyone who is eager to join us. There's a limited number of slots. All right. With that, folks, I'm going to let you know that I will plan to bring you more content today. Depending on whether or not I'm able to go live after practice, I will let you know and have instant reactions to that. I'll have my camp notes right up on hawkblogger.com, so make sure to look for those. And I will try to do the Seahawks 7 later today when there's a little bit better chance to recap all that happened in the day. So you really get all your Seahawks news in 7 minutes or less. So keep an eye out for the Seahawks 7 later today. And if anything else happens, any other news breaks, which, my God, if yesterday is any indication, who knows what today will bring, I will do my best to go live and give you instant reaction to news as it happens. All right, everybody. Appreciate you tuning in today. Appreciate the likes and the subscribes. And now's the time. Now's the time to like and subscribe and click the bell to get notified, because there's just gonna be a lot of content coming your way, a lot of Seahawks news. I will make sure to keep you at the forefront of all of that. Until the next time, take care, everybody. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been episode 123 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care.